In this video, I'm going to show you how to find the basic major, minor, and diminished chords in every key. This is the second video in a series of basic music theory lessons for guitarists. I've added timestamps in the description, so you can skip this intro if you want. But in my first video, I explained how to find the chords in the key of C using the C major scale. I'll put a link to that video in the description as well. In the video, I showed you the 7 notes of the C major scale and applied a chord to each note. So for example, the first note was C, and that was represented by a C major chord. The second note was D, and that was represented by a D minor chord. And I applied a chord to every other note in the scale over 1 octave. If any of this sounds or looks confusing, then you can watch that video and I'm sure it will be a lot easier to understand. And that showed us which chords were major, which chords were minor, and which chords were diminished in the key of C. And it showed us the order of the 7 basic major, minor, and diminished chords in a major key. I don't want to go into too much detail about this because I'll just be repeating what I've already gone over in that video. But we ended up with this order of chords. So the first chord was major, the second chord was minor, the third chord was minor, the fourth chord was major, the fifth chord was major, the sixth chord was minor, and the seventh chord was diminished. So each note in the scale was represented by either a major chord, a minor chord, or a diminished chord. And that's the main thing that you want to grasp from this video, the order of major, minor, and diminished chords in a key. I've also written down the number of each chord in orange, so you can differentiate between the number of the chord in the sequence and the fret numbers that I'm going to show you in a second. Some people would write these down in Roman numerals or call them tonic, supertonic, mediant, subdominant, dominant, submedian, or leading tone. So you might have heard some of these terms before, like dominant or dominant seventh when it comes to chords. But I'll just use numbers, which I'm hoping will make this a lot more simple to understand. Now, in the previous video, I only showed you the basic chords in the key of C. Let's try this out in the key of E. So I'm going to put this over here, and here are all the notes of the E major scale over 1 octave, which means I'm going from this E note and playing all the notes of the E major scale until I get to the next E note. So we have the notation, the tab, the pitch names of the notes, and the scale degrees. The scale degrees basically just show you which note you're playing in the scale, so whether you're playing the first note, the second note, the third note, and so on. I'm going to put the chord box here, and then I'll put the name of the chord in the middle here. I'll discuss the major scale formula later on in the video, but for now let's just find the chords in the key of E. These are the notes of the E major scale. I could get these notes in several places over the guitar neck, but I'm going to just play them on the E string and keep it simple, and that way we can easily see the distance between each note. And that's the E major scale. Now let's apply a chord to each note using the same order of major, minor, and diminished chords here on the left. So, 1 would be major, and the first note in the scale is E, so that's E major. I could just call this chord E instead of E major, they're the same thing, but I want people to be able to differentiate between when I'm talking about chords and when I'm talking about notes. So let's just call this chord E major. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, so pause the video if you want to try any of these out as you're watching. Also, see if you can figure out some of these chords yourself as you go along. The notes that make up the chords are here at the bottom of the diagrams as well, so you can check that each chord has the notes that are featured in the key of E major. 2 would be minor, and in this case that's F sharp, so the second chord in the key is F sharp minor. When I do a minor bar chord, I'm going to use this bar chord shape. 3 would be minor as well, so that's G sharp minor. 4 would be major, so that would be A major, and when I do a major bar chord, I'm going to use this bar chord shape. 5 would be major, so that would be B major. 6 would be minor, and that's C sharp, so that would be C sharp minor. And 7 would be diminished, so that's D sharp diminished. I'm using this shape for the diminished chord, but there's not that many good shapes to play diminished chord, so if you find a different one to use, you can use that instead. And these are the basic minor, major, and diminished chords in the key of E. You can play these chords in different ways too. So I could get A major and decide to play it as an open chord. As long as I play an A major chord with the notes of the A major chord, which are A, C sharp, and E, I can play the chord however I want. It would still be A major, and it would still be the fourth chord in the key of E major. Here's a picture of them all together. And all these chords would work well together in the key of E major. As an example, I'll play G sharp minor, F sharp minor, B, and E. It's a bit generic, but you can see that they fit together. And like I said in my previous video, these are not the only chords in the key of E. You will get extensions like E major 7 that are also in the key of E. These are just the chords in their most basic form. We're really just determining whether the chord is major, minor, or diminished. E major 7 would work in the key of E major because all the notes that make up the chord are in the key of E major, whereas E7 would not work in the key of E major because it has a D note. So that should be a D sharp instead, because the D note is not in the key of E major. Okay, so what if I wanted to do this in a different key? Well, before I just showed you the E major scale, you could do this with any major scale you already know, as long as you know the scale and the bar chord shapes to assign to each note. Or you could learn the major scale formula. So the formula for the major scale is whole tone, half tone, whole tone, whole tone, whole tone, half tone. You might also hear this described as tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. But that just means the same thing. A whole tone and a tone in music are the same thing. They're equal to 2 frets. A half tone and a semitone are the same thing as well, and they're equal to 1 fret. So the formula is basically 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret, 2 frets, 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret. And that's from our first note, which in this case is an A note, so I've written that just before the formula. So in the key of A, we have an A note, then 2 frets from that we have a B, 2 frets from that we have a C sharp, 1 fret from that we have a D, 2 frets from that we have an E, 2 frets from that we have an F sharp, 2 frets from that we have a G sharp, and then 1 fret from that we have an A again. Let's number them 1 to 7 as well, and I'm going to get rid of the fretboard markers here so it doesn't look too messy. I'll keep the blue dots on the diagram so we can see each note of the scale. So 1 is major, which is an A note, so that would be A major. 2 is minor, which is a B note, so that would be B minor. 3 is minor, which is a C sharp, so that would be C sharp minor. 4 is major, which is a D note, so that would be D major. 5 is major, which is an E note, so that would be E major. 6 is minor, which is an F sharp, so that would be F sharp minor. And 7 is diminished, which is a G sharp, so that would be G sharp diminished. And you could play these chords however you want. You could play a D like this instead, and you could play any of the chords in different ways as long as the chord has the same notes. So you can see this D major open chord has the notes D, A, D, F sharp. And this D major bar chord that we played before also has the notes D, A, D, F sharp. It just has an extra A note. There are many ways to play the same chord. And then if you wanted to move that scale to a different position, so let's say you wanted to figure out the notes in B major, you could find a B note and then follow the formula we did before. 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret, 2 frets, 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret. So you could either use the major scale formula to find the chords in every major key, Or you could use a major scale shape that you already know and just move the shape about to figure out what the basic chords are in the major key. And that will be my next video. It'll probably be a lot easier to understand than this one. So rather than use the major scale formula, I'm just going to show you a few different ways to play the major scale, and we'll apply a chord to each note. And then move the chords and the notes around the neck to figure out how to play chords in different keys. If you're not familiar with the notes on the neck of the guitar, try learning them or just Google guitar neck diagram for now. You'll find lots of images of notes on the guitar neck. It also helps to watch other videos of people explaining the same concepts that I've gone through in this video. Okay, so you could watch another person explain how to find chords in the key as well. You'll probably learn something in a different way than how I've taught it. So, thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. I'll be posting more content like this soon.